I once vowed that no matter what, I would never forgive him. He was my enemy, my kryptonite. Yet, when I saw him injured, his eyes filled with despair, I found myself unable to leave his side. Chapter 24. Attack. Did you like my omelette? Luna. Serena watched the head of the kitchen walking toward her with a smile on her sweaty face. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Thank you. It was delicious. Much more than my own recipe, beamed Serena. She then smirked at Toby and Harry, who were cleaning the plates with pieces of bread. I think you have my dear guards as a confirmation. I'm so happy you liked it. Dorothy grinned happily, feeling proud of herself. Serena stood up and picked up her dishes. You should definitely teach me how to cook it later. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. No, nodded Dorothy before quickly taking the dishes from Serena's hand. And you'll leave these here? I'll have my workers to clean the table. Please call me Serena. Sighed Serena. Not your Luna. Dorothy's eyes softened as she stared at Serena for a few seconds. As you wish, she replied before patting Serena's arm. Thank you, said Toby as he stood up. It was super delicious. Yeah, thank you. Harry stood up and smiled at Dorothy gratefully. You're welcome, boys. Dorothy grinned at them happily before turning to Serena again. Please come here from time to time. Everyone will be happy to see you. And I look forward to going with you in search of wild vegetables tomorrow. Serena watched the kitchen staff gather behind Dorothy, watching her with smiles. The warmth of their smiles entered her soul and made her heart swell. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She smiled. I will see you tomorrow morning then. She then said goodbye to everyone and turned to leave, only to be stopped by someone calling her name. Luna, wait. Serena turned with raised eyebrows and watched a woman rushing toward her with a basket in her hand. Can you do me a favor? Showing Serena the basket in her hand. I have made these for the children of the orphanage. Can you deliver them? I have heard they are in the garden and playing. Oh yes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Smiled Serena and grabbed the basket from the woman. She had missed the little Munchkins already, and excitement bubbled in her at the thought of seeing them again. Thank you, Luna, beamed the woman happily and stepped back beside Dorothy, whose eyes were glinting mischievously. Saying goodbye again, Serena soon was out of the kitchen, followed by her guards. Dorothy suddenly squealed and grabbed the arm of the woman who gave Serena the basket. You are a genius, she said happily. They only need more time together. I'm sure she will warm up to Alpha if she spends more time with him. And we all should help him by bringing them together by accident. Serena smiled softly when she heard the loud shrieks of laughter coming from the garden where she had met the children yesterday. I'm sure they will be so happy when they see these sweets, she said to Toby and Harry, walking to the door that led to the garden. Happily, she stepped out of the door, busy adjusting the cloth on top of the cookies to hide them from their sight at first. A gasp left her lips as she looked up, and her smile immediately fell, replaced by shock at seeing the scene in front of her. Her heart melted right then, and there at the beautiful sight in front of her, there was her mate, lying down in the grass, laughing freely as all of the children of the orphanage were either on top of him or around him, trying to tickle him or keep him down. All line of worry had left his face and he looked so much younger. It was the first time Serena had seen him that happy and free. He looked even more handsome while laughing heartily. The corners of his eyes were wrinkled as he squirmed on the ground, trying to get away from the small hands that were tickling him. Serena's eyes softened, so did her heart, and she couldn't bring herself to take her eyes off of him. Uncontrollably, a tear slid down her face. What would have happened if he had accepted her 3 years ago? Would they have their own kids by then? Could she ever forgive him and return his feelings? Could she heal her soul enough to accept him and help him in the highs and lows of life? Luna, Meto's excited squawk stopped everyone and all heads snapped toward her. Especially a pair of shining dark brown orbs that got out of focus the moment they snapped open at hearing muttering. Ajax felt his heart soaring high at the sight of an angel he was lucky to have as a mate. She was standing there in a simple light green dress, clutching a basket in her delicate hands tightly. Her long hair was moving freely with the soft breeze and her beautiful emerald green eyes were shining in the light of the sun. She was staring back at him and the tenderness and vulnerability in her eyes made him breathless. She broke the eye contact just as the group of kids latched onto her skirt, now leaving Ajax behind and demanding her attention. He smiled warmly and sat up slowly, watching his mate kneeling on the ground, smiling and talking with the kids. Her fluffy puppy was among the kids, trying desperately to find a way to reach her owner. He just sat there and watched the scene with a lazy smile on his face. The kids let out squeals and shrieks of happiness when she pulled away the cloth that was covering her basket and began to hand over the cookies that were hidden in the basket. The sight was simply breathtaking. It was as if every sound muffled around him as she became the center of his world. So beautiful, so pure, so divine. And she was his mate, his. He had meant every word that he had told her last night. He wasn't a man who was afraid of anything. He was one of the most fearless men in all Aetheria. But after seeing Serena after 3 years and getting to know her, he had come to learn about fear in detail. He had come to learn how it felt to always feel fearful for the safety of his mate and for her life. Last night, and right after she had left him in the main square, when he had smelled the scent of her blood, all of his senses had shut down and the fear for her life had gripped his heart and mind tightly as one thought had roared in his mind. Had she hurt herself to get away from this life and him? The relief that he had felt upon seeing her healthy had caused him to confess his feelings to her, and he didn't regret it one bit. He had felt her walls crumbling down a bit at hearing his confession, and for the first time, she had shown him affection by caressing his hands and calling his name. When he had gone to bed finally, the only thought in his mind was that little act of affection toward him, and he had finally gone to sleep on his bed with a smile and had a good night's sleep. Her eyes once again found him, and he could swear a ghost of a smile played on her pink lips as she stood up. His whole body went rigid as she began walking toward him. He sat straighter and ran a hand through his messy hair, trying to tame it a bit, unaware of the fact she was finding his messy hair sexy. "Do you have a cookie for me too, beautiful angel?" he asked once she was towering in front of him. His smile broadened when her cheeks dusted with pink. She took out a cookie from her basket and held it in front of his face. She said shyly. His wolf let out a howl of joy and laid down on the ground with his belly up, happy to finally have their mate looking at them without a hint of hate. He grabbed her hand instead and pressed his lips to her knuckles. Her cheeks reddened even more and she gulped nervously but didn't take her hand away. He took the cookie without taking his eyes off her and bit into the sweet. Serena looked down, unable to stare into his intense eyes anymore. Suddenly the air became too suffocating and she felt hot and bothered. His eyes were so intense and full of love and affection as if he was looking at the rarest jewel in the world. "Luna, come and play with Alpha and us." Little Matteo came to her rescue right on time and tugged at her skirt. I don't think that," Serena began to say hesitantly, but was cut off as all the kids gathered around her, looking up at her with puppy eyes. "Please, Luna, please." Her heart melted at seeing their adorable pouts and she couldn't find in herself to say no to them. "Okay. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." She smiled and raised her hands in surrender. In. She chuckled as Ajax and the kids pumped their fists in the air and cheered loudly. Her eyes once again locked with Ajax's sparkling eyes. Just this one time I will put my hate away and enjoy being with my," she told herself and hesitantly stretched her hand in front of Ajax. Ajax's eyes went wide as he stared at her with shock. His heart was beating miles per second as he kept staring at his mate. She had offered him her hand. He grinned happily and quickly grabbed her hand and stood up without putting any pressure on her. He pulled her closer to his chest and before she could react he planted a chaste kiss on her forehead. Before letting her go, he quickly stepped back and clapped his hands, looking at the kids again. "Okay, agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Who's ready to play tag? He asked happily and glanced at Serena briefly, feeling his heart on the verge of bursting from feeling too much love for her. The next hour was the happiest hour of both of their lives, and Jax was able to hug her tightly while she laughed and occasionally stole kisses on her cheeks and forehead, and Serena just let herself enjoy the affection that her mate was showering her with, feeling more livelier than ever. For the first time in her life, she was feeling so light-hearted, happy, and free. And Jax groaned as he sat down next to Serena on the grass, watching the kids continue playing. Will they ever run out of energy? He grunted, rubbing his shoulders. His eyes snapped to Serena at hearing her giggle, and he grinned like an idiot, feeling ecstatic and proud to be able to make her laugh. They are so lovely, spoke Serena softly. She turned her head a bit and saw Ajax watching her with a full of love look in his eyes. She quickly averted her eyes and looked at the ground, feeling her cheeks heating up. Why are you looking at me like that? She mumbled under her breath, letting her hair fall around her to cover her face from him. Ajax gently tucked her hair behind her ear and scooted closer to her so their shoulders were touching. Can I have hope, Serena? He asked softly, watching her eyes turning to him again. Hope for what? She gulped, though she could guess what he was talking about. Can I have hope that you will try to forgive me and give me a chance? He asked with hope glistening in his eyes. Sadness crept back into her eyes and she looked away. How she wished that she could just let everything go and stay in the happiness of an hour ago. To just let go of everything and start a life with her mate. But alas, life is not that easy. As much as she loved that, the horrible memories of the past would find a way to creep back into her mind and just ruin every ounce of joy. And it pained her heart greatly. She felt as if she could never truly find happiness. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I don't know. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She answered defeated. The pain is too much to ignore. I don't think I can ever return your feelings purely, for there is too much baggage. But Jax looked away from her and stared at the playing kids. So we are back to calling me by my title again, he stated bitterly. Serena looked at him and narrowed her eyes. You talk as if I'm enjoying this condition, she snapped. As if it is easy for me and is not killing me every second. Jax turned and glared at her. But you sure I'll do anything to make it easier for us. He snarled. Why can't you just forget about the past and let it go? Why can't you just focus on the future? You have the power to bring happiness to us, you. You have no idea what you are asking. Serena fired back. You have no idea what has happened to me. She then began to get up to leave, feeling drained all of a sudden again. But Ajax quickly grabbed her hand and pulled her back down. Then share it with me, he begged desperately, his anger turning into a pleasing look. Tell me so we can carry this burden together. Maybe then we can find a solution. A bond. Serena looked away from him, feeling her heart taking once again. I can't. She choked and tried to gulp down the lump in her throat. Please don't task it. Okay. Okay. I will shut up. Enthusiasm, Ajax said quickly, his eyes flickering worriedly between her eyes and her hand that was rubbing her chest above her heart. Just stay a bit more with me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I will shut up. Please. Serena sighed and nodded tiredly. This new feeling that she was experiencing was driving her insane. He was bringing her both pain and relief at the same time, as if he was offering her fire and water at the same time, and it was burning her even more. But in the end, her need to be near him won the battle, and she turned to watch the kids silently again. The wind blew and she shivered slightly and wrapped her arms around herself. In less than a second, she felt Ajax's strong arm wrapping around her and pulling her more into his side. Tired of everything, she just leaned into him, enjoying the warmth that his body was providing. Soon exhaustion finally caught up to her and her eyes slowly fluttered shut, and she fell into a deep slumber in her mate's arms. Anjet gently kissed the crown of her head and tightened his hold on her. "You don't know how much it pains me that you don't talk to me," he whispered with a pained tone. "But I will be by your side no matter what. I failed in the past, but I won't let myself fail again. I will protect your soul and body with my life." Serena slowly opened her eyes and was met by the darkness of her room. She yawned, threw her blanket away before sitting up slowly. It was dark outside and a small candle was burning in a corner of her room, providing a bit of light. It seemed she had slept for more than 8 hours and she was feeling refreshed. She knew Ajax must have been the one who had brought her back to her room. She felt a painful tug in her heart, remembering his words before darkness took her away. She had heard his words in the realm between sleeping and awakeness. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." She thought she had imagined everything that he had said, but she knew they were reality. Standing up, she stretched her stiff body a bit before walking toward a basin and the pitcher on her table. She washed her slightly feverish face with the cool water of the pitcher. An uneasy feeling was developing in the pit of her stomach since she had woken up, and it was growing with rapid speed. Cleaning herself up a bit, she walked to her door, opened it, and stepped outside. She quickly frowned when she saw Harry and Toby's stiff bodies, standing with their backs to the door of her room as she could hear a commotion coming from the medical ward. Something was wrong. Harry turned to her and she instantly knew something was wrong from the look on his face. "Good. You are awake," he stated before grabbing her hand and beginning to drag her through the corridor. "We should take you to the safe room." "Safe room?" asked Serena frantically, struggling to stop Harry from taking her. "What are you talking about? What is happening?" "There is no time for explanation, Serena," growled Harry, turning to look back at her, his grey eyes shining as his wolf surfaced. "We are under attack." Serena gasped and dug her heels into the ground and stopped Harry effectively. "An attack?" she asked, frightened. "Yes, the Rouges and hunters have attacked from the west," snarled Toby with fisted hands, making Serena shocked by seeing him that serious for the first time. "Their number is so many." Serena felt her heart sinking into the pit of her stomach and her eyes widened as fear gripped her heart tightly. "We have direct orders from Alpha to take you to the safe room with other women and children," stated Harry, reaching to take her hand once again. But she quickly stepped back and frowned deeply. "No," she said firmly. "I won't go there. I will go to the medical ward. It's a matter of time before the injured werewolves are rushed there." "Serena," snarled Harry, taking a step toward her. "We don't have time for this. Alpha will kill us if anything happens to you." "You call me your freaking Luna?" "Right," said Serena, matching his glare. "Then you should know that my place is here where I can help my people, and I will stay no matter what when I know I can help." Harry huffed and looked away, and Toby looked at her with uncertainty. "I know you two want to go and help." She stepped forward, grabbed their arms, pulled them down, and kissed their foreheads before stepping back again. "Go and be careful. I will be safe. We need every single hand we can get. Go." Harry and Toby stared at her for a few seconds before they glanced at each other. "Go to Healer Jake, and for fuck's sake, stay safe," growled Harry before he turned and ran down the corridor. Toby quickly stepped forward and kissed her forehead before he rushed after Harry. Serena didn't waste time as well and ran toward the medical ward. There was chaos going on inside the medical ward. Everyone was running around, preparing to treat the wounded werewolves, and based on the grim or terrified looks on their faces, Serena was sure they were not hearing good news through their mind link. "Healer Jake," she called out loudly when she saw the old man and rushed toward him. Jake's head snapped toward Serena. His face morphed into shock and then anger in a second. "Serena, what are you doing here? You should be in the safe room," he snapped angrily. "I'm not leaving here," she answered quickly. "You will need help, and I can offer help that you can't ignore. Just tell me what to do." Jake growled in frustration before shoving the bandages he had in his hand into hers. "The number of injured people seems to be many. he explained quickly. "I'm going to grab a few of my healers and run to the battlefield. We need to give the poison people our antidote as soon as possible." He then grabbed her shoulders and stared into her eyes intently. "You are the head here until I return," he ordered firmly. "I leave everything in your hands." "Luna," Serena nodded firmly. "Just return alive." She responded warily, trying to gulp down her increasing fear. Soon a group of his healers and Serena began instructing others to get prepared the best that they could. She never thought a day would come when she would become worried for anyone from some Crescent Pack. But as she rushed to the first wounded person who was rushed inside the ward, she found her mind wandering anxiously to the people who had become important to her a month and a half. James, Harry, Toby, Nick, Damien, her night guards, healer Jake and his healers Mary, Dorothy, and kitchen staff, Lady Camilla and the kids of the orphanage, Mavis and Clara, and the last one that the thought of losing him was killing her from inside, was her mate, Alpha Ajax. And right then she knew she was screwed because she had become attached and had become attached badly. Chapter 25, Grief. There was chaos inside of the infirmary. Screams, grunts, and groans of pain had filled the medical ward as wounded werewolves were rushed inside. Serena's dress and apron were full of bloodstains. Her face and forehead were also stained with blood from the time she had tried to wipe sweat from her forehead with the back of a hand or when blood had splashed on her face from a deep wound. Almost 2 hours had passed from the start of the war, and the number of wounded had increased. Serena was thankful that they were able to discover the antidote on time. Many had been brought there who had been shot with more than 3 arrows, and if healer Jake had not given them the antidote in time, they would have reached the infirmary alive. None of her friends had been brought to the infirmary, and she didn't know if it was a good sign or a bad one. Her heart was already aching so much, and she had emptied 1 bottle of her potions in the past hours. Sensing a movement at the double doors, her head snapped toward it. Her eyes widened when she saw James walking in, almost carrying a man who was supported by him. He looked so disheveled and dirty. A long gash could be seen on his bare chest that was almost already healed. But overall he looked fine. "James," yelled Serena and rushed toward him. 2 nurses grabbed the wounded man who was with James and took him to one of the nearby beds. James quickly pulled Serena into a tight hug. "You should be in the safe room," he groaned and pulled back, glaring down at Serena. "How is it going on?" She ignored his statement and asked hurriedly while checking his body for any life-threatening injury. "Is it over? We managed to kill so many of the Rouges," grunted James with clenched fists. "The hunters are the biggest problems. The fuckers hide in the shadows and shoot us or use their blades out of nowhere. But we have almost defeated them." He then bent down and kissed her forehead. "I should leave. Take care," he said before rushing out again. "Luna, we need you here." Someone called Serena, and she quickly walked toward the bed she had been summoned to. The next half an hour was spent tending to a few more wounded men and women who were brought into the infirmary before the flow finally stopped. A murmur suddenly began between the weary healers and nurses, catching Serena's attention. "What happened?" asked Serena from the nurse beside her. "We won, Luna," the nurse answered with a relieved smile on his lips. "They just announced it through the mind link." Serena closed her eyes and sighed deeply in relief. Opening her eyes, she nodded to the man. Patting his arm, she looked around her. The loud screams were now dulled to occasional whimpers or slow groans of pain. Everyone was already healing rapidly thanks to their werewolf genes. Those who were shot with poison arrows had slower healing speed because of the poison and antidotes still in their bodies. Only if she had her power she could have healed all of them already. Serena thought sorrowfully before taking off her bloody apron and walking toward a basin and a water hand pump in a corner. She washed her hands and face from blood before releasing her hair from the tight bun she had pulled them into. Suddenly, they all heard thunderous footsteps and looked at the door frantically, fearing the worst. A few seconds later, a panicked Grayson came barreling into the medical ward. Looking around anxiously, his eyes found Serena in a corner, and he rushed toward her in long strides. Serena gulped and took a step back instinctively as the brutal beta covered in blood approached her. Her heartbeat skyrocketed as old fear gripped her soul. "You must come with me," growled Grayson, his wolf on edge, before he grabbed Serena by her wrist and began to drag her out of the medical ward. "Where are you taking me?" squealed Serena, surprised as she stumbled behind Grace and trying to keep up with his long strides. He answered, and Serena's heart skipped a beat, fearing for the worst before he continued. "His wolf has gone out of control. He is destroying everything and doesn't shift back. You are the only one who can calm him down." Serena's eyes widened, and then before she could open her mouth to protest, Grayson's next word shut her up quickly. "He is badly wounded, and if you don't help him quickly he will lose so much blood, if not die from the poison," said Grayson with a hint of worry in his tone. "We do not know the extent of his injuries," explained Grayson further. "He was in the middle of the battlefield, and at some point, he was fighting with 10 Rouges at the same time. A silver blade is sticking out of his front leg, and I'm sure he was hit by an arrow. I don't know how he is standing on his feet." Serena was hit with waves of nausea and worry as he talked more about Ajax's condition. She felt a painful tug on her heart as they reached the pack houses with already hear angry growls and grunts of pain. They pushed past the doors and Serena gasped, seeing the scene playing in front of her. A giant black wolf was pacing in front of the porch, grunting and growling while white foam mixed with blood was running down his mouth. His mouth was pulled up into a snarl and his savage eyes were challenging anyone who had balls to try and go near him in order to calm him down. His matted black fur was shining a bit under the light of the torches, showing them from the fresh blood that was leaking from so many wounds on his body. Large claw lashes could be seen on his body where fur had been ripped away. She could see the small silver blade that was still embedded in his flesh, surely creating a sizzling sensation in his flesh. Serena's healer Jake, Mick, and Damien before the beast suddenly froze and his head snapped in her direction. His silver eyes got fixed on her before snapping to Grayson beside her. It let out a thundering roar that froze everyone in their places. Grayson stiffened for a second on his spot before quickly letting go of Serena's wrist and stepping away from her hurriedly, leaving a paralyzed Serena in her place. The beast of a wolf growled at Grayson and bared his bloody teeth at him. It crouched down on his hind legs, ready to jump at Grayson, who had dared to grab his mate. But one shout from his lovely mate stopped him right away. "To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Stop." The beast's eyes once again shot toward his angel of a mate, and before anyone could blink, he was right in front of her and his hot breath was fanning her face. Worried voices shouting Serena's name could be heard, but surprisingly all the fear she was feeling was for her mate and not herself. She was sure he would never hurt her at all ever again. Not in human form and not in wolf. The wolf easily towered over her petite form, his bloody and dirty snout an inch away from her face. She quickly brought her hands up and sank them into his matted fur, pulling his face down. She leaned her forehead on the spot between his eyes, hearing a sound between a growl and a guttural sound of contentment coming from his mouth and vibrating her body. "Calm down. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," she whispered, knowing well he could hear her perfectly. She ran her hands up and down his snout, trying to calm the beast down. "You are wounded badly. We need to take care of your wounds." The wolf let out a low whine, buried his snout in her neck to the spot her mark should have been. "Shut. It's all right." She tried to sedate him, though her voice wavered and shook a bit at feeling his tongue licking her skin tenderly, sending delicious tingles down her spine. She pulled back and stared into the silver lava of his eyes. "Please. You are hurt. I need you to shift so I can take care of you," she pleaded worriedly, her eyes flickering to the pool of blood that was slowly forming under Ajax's wolf. "Please," she whispered, looking desperately into the wolf's eyes while running her hands up and down his snout. The wolf let out a low whine and then his whole body began to tremble. The cracking of bones was heard and soon a battered and bloodied Ajax was standing in front of her in all his naked glory. "Serena," he whispered while pulling her into his arms, not caring that he was making her dress bloody. He was already feeling so weak in his human form. feeling his body on her for support. She quickly wrapped an arm around him, trying to help him stand on his feet. "I'm here. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," she whispered. His left Ajax says now that he pulled back a bit and glared at his mate, who threw the silver blade that was in his shoulder away, looking up at him sheepishly. She said before everyone gathered around them, "It was silver. Drink this." Quickly, ordered a weary-looking healer Jake, holding a small bottle in front of Ajax. Serena grabbed the bottle, opened its cap, and put it on Ajax's lips. "Drink this." Her cheeks were already red, trying to ignore his gifted package down there that was pressed to her stomach with only her dress in between. Ajax smiled tiredly at her. Despite the haze in his mind, he was enjoying having her full attention on him. It made him feel so good to have her worried eyes fixed on him and hear her calling his name over again. It meant she cared for him. He grabbed the bowl from her hand and gulped down the bitter liquid just to please his mate. Finishing it, he bent down his head and rested his forehead on her shoulder. "We should take you to the infirmary," said Serena, maneuvering her body so that she was beside him with his arm around her shoulder, trying to take him toward the doors. Grayson quickly grabbed Ajax's other arm and threw it around his neck. "Come on, man," he said worriedly, helping Serena to take Ajax inside. Ajax refused to take a step and looked back at others who were standing at the bottom of the stairs looking at him with worry. "Damien, take care of everything. Make sure the borders are safe and there is no breach," he ordered weakly. "Yes, Alpha." Both men in union, watching their Alpha being carried away before shifting and sprinting to the village gates. Ajax was panting when they were near the medical ward. The blood loss and severity of his wounds were taking a toll on him finally. His only source of energy was his mate and the physical contact he had with her. "Take him to my room," stated Serena, and let go of Ajax. Just as she was about to take a step away, Ajax's hand shot out and grabbed her arm. Her head snapped toward him and saw his eyes watching her with mild panic in them. "I just need to grab a few things to clean your wounds," she explained reassuringly and put a gentle hand on his. "I will be with you in no time." Ajax gulped before he nodded hesitantly and let go of her. His eyes watched her disappearing into the medical ward as Grayson began to drag him toward her room. True to her words, Serena was back in her room only a minute after them and saw Ajax sitting on her bed with his head in his hands. Grayson was standing beside him, looking down at him worriedly while pressing a cloth to the blade's wound. Ajax's head shot up at sensing her presence and his body visibly relaxed upon seeing her. Serena put the things she had brought with her on her chair and then put her hands on Ajax's shoulders and pushed on them gently to help him lay down. "You need to lay down." But Ajax didn't budge and shook his head. He raised his hands and rubbed, his face roughly as if trying to clear his mind. Serena turned to Grayson. "Thank you. Beta, can you leave us? I promise to tend to his wounds. I will go to help Damien and Nick to secure the lands." Grayson nodded and left without another word. Serene quickly jumped into action, taking a blanket. She wrapped it around Ajax's rumbling body before starting to work on his wounds. His body was littered with so many slashes and bit marks. Serena wasn't even sure where to begin with. Some of his small wounds were already healed and the others were healing slowly due to their severity and the poison antidote in his blood. How the poison had not killed him after that long was beyond her. She began by cleaning the blood from his body to have a better view of the wounds. Grabbing a towel, she dipped it in warm water and gently ran it on his legs. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." And also, her heart was clenching and unclenching at how bad and deep some of his wounds were. That brought tears to her eyes, making her wonder just how strong her mate was. She started with the deep blade wound on the back of his shoulder and stepped between his legs to have better access to the wound. Ajax hissed in pain and clutched her waist with one hand as she began to disinfect the wound. "We lost 8 of our warriors tonight," said Ajax, meaning to talk about the things that were driving him crazy. 5 men and 3 women. I know, said Serena softly. But people lost their mates tonight, panted Ajax, his breaths coming out dragged as he balled his fist. But families lost their loved ones. I know. Her voice came a bit shaky and strained. It's all my fault, groaned Ajax and rubbed his face roughly again with his hand that Serena was not working on. His eyes became distant again. I tried to help everyone on the battlefield. I tried to kill as many of those possible. Yet my warriors fell right before my eyes. They died because of my inability. Serena pushed him back a bit and stared into his eyes seriously. No, she stated firmly. You did all you could have done. You did your best. Then maybe I should have done better. He snarled, fist in his hands, causing more blood to pour out of his arm's wounds. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Look at yourself. Serena shook him a bit, tears falling from her eyes. Your body is littered with life, threatening wounds even for an alpha like you. You could have died tonight. Ajax narrowed his eyes and glared at her. Then I should have fucking died with them. There should have been another way to protect everyone. My people deserve a better. Shut up, snapped Serena, glaring down at him. His eyes widened as he looked up into her blazing eyes. All of his anger suddenly left him, and he became speechless upon seeing the fierce expression in them. You are a great alpha, she spoke softly. Ever since I have come back to the pack, all I've heard from everyone is how great alpha you are. And I don't say this only from hearing others. Ajax's shoulders sagged at hearing her words. It was as if a great burden had been lifted from his shoulders at hearing from her mouth that he was doing everything right. Serena's eyes softened, and she gently pushed the hair that had covered his sweaty forehead away. I have seen with my very own eyes the changes you have made. Her voice barely above a whisper as she stared into his eyes. I have seen the great changes you have made that only a wise and strong leader can make. And I'm proud of you. Ajax's body shook as emotions erupted inside of his soul. Tears beamed in his eyes that were fixed on his mate's face. His bottom lip trembled as a huge lump closed his throat. He raised his tight fist and slammed it into his chest right above his aching and clenching heart. Hearing Serena's last sentence, although brought him immense relief, also brought down the facade of the tough guy he was wearing all the time. And for the first time, he let his vulnerability show in front of his mate. Serena, he choked out as tears ran down his face. It hurts so much. I have failed my mate. I have failed my people. I lost my warriors tonight. Serena quickly wrapped her arms around his shoulders and head and pulled him into a tight hug as tears streamed down her face. She was sure somehow, despite their broken mate bond, she could feel his pain in her soul, for her heart burned with each sob that shook his battered and bloodied body. Ajax quickly wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her close to him and buried his face in her stomach, letting his sadness and anger flow out of him with his tears. And in that moment he cowed and thanked the moon goddess enough for giving him another chance to be with his mate, for she was the only one who was able to calm down his soul. His serene Ajax's eyes fluttered open. He stared at the ceiling for a moment as a delicious haze clouded his mind. It was as if he was drowned in his mate's scent. It was all around him. His body felt so, but it was cocooned in warmth, making the fighting with sleep harder for him. But the great universes didn't last long, and the events of last night came crashing down on him, and his heart clenched once again. The only relief for him was Serena's soothing words and her show of affection last night. Given the circumstances, it was so hard for him to approve himself, but hearing that she was proud of him and saw him as a good alpha gave him hope. He slowly sat up with a groan and stretched his sore and stiff muscles. Looking around, he found himself in Serena's room. It was no surprise that he had slept so tightly. The rays of the sun were peeking inside the room from the gaps between the curtain and the wall as it moved with the soft breeze coming from the window. The birds were chirping outside. There was a peace in the air that made it difficult to believe what bloodshed had happened last night. He frowned when he didn't see Serena anywhere in the room. Throwing the blanket away, he looked at his arms and hands and cringed at the stale smell of death. Dried blood, and different coming from his skin. His wounds were all healed and no trace of them had remained. He was busy unwrapping the bandages from around his arms or legs when the door was opened silently and the scent of his mate entered the room before her. She looked clean and had a clean dress on. Her face looked so tired, indicating she had been up all night. A tray of food was in her hands and a mouth-watering smell was coming from it. Her eyes found him sitting on the bed and she smiled tiredly. "You are awake?" Walking inside and closing the door behind her. "Yes," answered Ajax and licked his dry lips. Watching her walking toward the bed, she sat at the edge of the bed and put the tray of food on his lap. "Everyone has already healed and left the medical ward, and I heard from your betas that the borders are safe and protected." He watched her mesmerized as she explained what she had heard, trying to ease his mind. "All your wounds are healed too, thanks to your strong body and wolf," she said with a smile, and his wolf purred in his mind at hearing her praise. "Eat your breakfast." She pointed to the tray. "You need your strength back before going to take care of pack matters." She then proceeded to stand up but stopped and looked back at her mate when he suddenly grabbed her hand. "Thank you, Serena," he said sincerely, "for helping me last night, for being there for me." "You're welcome," she answered softly. "I meant and believed every word I said." He felt his chest puffing at hearing her praise and felt proud. He stared deep into her eyes, feeling electricity spark between them, as if trying to mend the broken bond. All he wanted was to pull her into his lap and kiss those kissable and rosy lips of hers that looked so soft and divine. But the perfect moment was lost as his stomach let out an angry rumble. Serena put a hand on her mouth, unable to hide her giggles as Ajax groaned and let go of her hand embarrassed. "Eat up," grinned Serena while grabbing the bandages that Ajax had thrown away. Listening to his mate, Ajax picked up the lid of the tray and quickly dug into the heavenly breakfast while opening his mind link. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Damien, how are the things?" "Everything is under control." Grace Inez's voice quickly filled his mind. "We have doubled the patrol of the borders. Damien has taken a group and has piled all the carcasses of the rougers and hunters outside of the border to burn." There was a pause before Grayson spoke again, his tone somber. "The funeral of our own warriors will be held as soon as you can join us." The food suddenly turned bitter in Ajax's mouth, but he stopped eating. He could feel the grief of all of the pack in his heart for the death of 8 warriors. "They'll be with you shortly. Everything is fine," asks Arena, noticing his sudden change of energy. Ajax sighed and stood up, thankful of the short Serena had forced him to wear last night. He stepped in front of her and grabbed her hands, feeling joyful that she didn't pull them away like she used to do. Instead, a dust of pink coated her cheeks because of their close proximity and the sight of his almost naked body. He brought her hands up and gently kissed the back of them. "I can't pull my duties anymore." Looking into her eyes, "There are things I should take care of. I should go. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," said Serena, her voice barely above a whisper. Her heartbeat increased as she found herself feeling sad that he was leaving her. "In a few hours, we will hold a funeral for those who fell last night." His voice was strained and laced with sadness. "Will you come? Your presence will be so valuable for me and the pack." A hint of pride swelled in her chest at hearing his words. His eyes were begging her, and she knew he badly wanted her presence there to support him. And so she nodded her head. "I will be there." And Jack sighed in relief and smiled slightly. He bent down and gently kissed her forehead. "Thank you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," he said before pulling back. "Rest a bit. I will send someone after you." She gulped and nodded her head, unable to utter any words as different emotions were swirling in her soul. He had for sure taken a hammer and was personally destroying all of the walls she had created around her heart to the point she couldn't even find herself hating him. She was craving his attention and affection and wanted even more. So much more that it was frightening her. Kissing her forehead one more time, He finally willed himself to let go of her and pull back. He turned around quickly and headed toward the door, and soon he was out of her room that was beckoning him toward it. Knowing he wouldn't be able to leave her if he had stayed looking at her one more second. Everyone had gathered on a hill near the village. The rain was pouring down, soaking everyone and dampening their mood even more. Holes were dug on the hill, ready to accept the bodies of the brave warriors who had lost their lives last night. Serena's tears were already running down her face as she watched the families of mates of the fallen warriors weeping and mourning their loved ones. Only 2 of the fallen warriors were mated, as Serena was praying for the 6 remaining werewolves who had lost their mates unknowingly to find a second chance mate. She had felt the pain of losing her mate and didn't wish it for anyone. Suddenly everyone parted ways as men began to bring the bodies of the fallen in their coffins, with Ajax and Grayson at the front, each holding a side of the front of the first coffin. The sound of family sobbing and screams filled the sky, and the rest of the pack either began to cry or dropped their heads in sadness. Serena dropped her head as silent sobs shook her body. It was as if she could feel the pain as everyone in her heart, feeling her soul being torn apart. She didn't know how long she cried until she felt a rough warm hand grabbing her cold one. Looking up, she saw Ajax standing beside her. He squeezed her hand trying to comfort her, but although his face was stone cold, Serena could see tears running down his face, mixing with the rain that was pouring down on them. She squeezed his hand too, trying to somehow give him a bit of comfort, telling him silently that she was there with him, with his pack, sharing their grief. And she didn't know, but it meant a world to him. "What the hell do you mean that you failed, Taha?" The kneeling man flinched as a glass shattered beside him on the ground. He dared and looked up into the red eyes of the furious woman who was standing a few meters away in front of him. She was beautiful, painstakingly beautiful. She looked like a woman in her 30s, but her eyes were showing that she was indeed older than so many who had walked on Aetheria, though she looked so cold and terrifying. Her long hair was the color of ice, not so different from her snow, white skin that had not seen the light of the sun for many years. Her furious eyes were blazing like 2 pools of blood. Not that her normal pitch black eyes were any different. It was as if long years of cruelty and pure malice had sucked any life from her, leaving only a monster in place. The room they were in had no windows. It was cold, as if the fire in the giant fireplace didn't have any duties other than giving the room a more eerie feeling with its dancing flames. "I supplied you with everything," shouted the woman, her long black dress swooshing as she paced angrily. "Poison. Do you know how much it's hard to find those rouges? Some of them are already lost, but I need to spend so much fucking energy to turn the rest of them into the mindless beasts that follow orders." She then glared daggers at the bowing man in front of her. "And you dare to come and tell me that you failed to destroy that pack and kill its alpha? Mother, calm down." A bored voice drawled, and the man's eyes snapped toward the other woman present in the room, suddenly feeling grateful for her presence. She was even more beautiful than her mother, if it was even possible, for she looked more like a human. She was tall and slender just like her so-called mother. Her pin, straight black hair was reaching her waist, a contrast to her pale skin. Her bored grey eyes were fixed on her mother as she strode Leslie toward her mother, clad in a black dress and a cape that was blood red from inside and pitch black from outside. "How can I calm down?" shrieked the older woman, and the trembling man hardly resisted the urge to cover his ears. "They fucked up my plan. That bloody Alpha King and the Council have somehow gotten to know about us. It's only a matter of time before they attack us, and this idiot lost our great chance to eliminate my most important fear. You should stop worrying too much about the Crimson Crescent pack." The daughter rolled her eyes. "What are they other than a mere pack?" The older woman hissed angrily at the other woman before continuing to pace. "They are important." She spoke almost to herself. "The prophecy can't be wrong. My lady, believe me, we did our best," said the man suddenly, and both women snapped their eyes back to him. The man gulped and continued. "But their alpha was so strong and fearless. Nothing would work on him, not even the poison." His brows furrowed as she continued, as if remembering something. "And it seemed our poison was ineffective on them. I swear I saw a few of those filthy werewolves that were shot by arrows coming back to the battlefield only a few minutes later, if their injury was not vital." Both women suddenly went rigid as the same thought penetrated their minds. The man's eyes suddenly went wide as saucers and he began to claw at his neck as if someone was choking him. His face went purple before a snap was heard and he fell to the ground motionless. "They have the antidote," said the older woman, her eyes distant, so she didn't see the small glint of fear in her daughter's eyes. "The prophecy is in motion." "That's absurd," stated the daughter. She watched her mother opening her arms to both sides, tilting her head back and closing her eyes. The young woman tried hard to control her irregular breathing as she watched her mother's body begin to tremble. Her mother was supposed to get to know about her presence yet, but the younger woman knew her hope was in vain the moment her mother came back to reality with a loud gasp and opened her wide eyes. "She is back. She is back in that bloody pack and they are together," she stated in a daze, staring into space. "Why is she not dead? How is it possible?" Her head suddenly snapped toward her daughter, and it was not hard for the daughter to see fear deep in her mother's eyes. "Go and find her." "Lilith," ordered the mother with a cold, angry tone. "Find that bitch and end her bloodline. I want her head." Lilith's eyes colder than ice met her mother's as she nodded. "You have it, my lady," she answered firmly. "I shall end all of your worries." She then turned away and walked out of the room into the dark hallways. Soon she was outside of the dark fortress and into the misty forest. She kept walking, listening to any sound around her. She halted once she heard a snap of a twig. "You can come out, Sebastian," she called out. A rustling was heard to her right before a hooded figure came out from behind a tree. The person pulled down his hood, a man with short curly red hair and green nervous eyes. "How did it go?" he asked anxiously. The woman didn't turn to look at him. Her hard eyes were staring into the distance. "You should go to Alpha King's territory. Find Vaughn and tell him that he should hurry and find the second token and destroy it." "What?" gasped Sebastian with horror. Even the thought of going into the lands of the Alpha King and seeking him terrified the mage to the core. "Why do you not go there yourself?" "Because we are running out of time," she gritted out, moving her fingers around her neck and a necklace appeared around her neck. "Mother dearest just found out about Serena and ordered me to bring her Serena's head," she hissed while fumbling with the necklace. Sebastian's eyes went wide and he took a step back. "But how?" he screeched as his body began to shake. "You have put a protection spell on her. It's not time to ask questions," hissed Lilith as she stood in front of Sebastian and shoved the necklace in his hands. "Go and find Vaughn and tell him everything. Tell him it's essential to destroy the third token. And don't worry, nothing will happen to you while you have this necklace with you." "Then where are you going?" asked Sebastian, clutching the necklace in his hands. "In going after the second token and we'll meet all of you at the council," answered Lilith and stepped back as a dark smirk tugged aside of her rose, red lips up. "It's time for the curtains to finally fall."